conversations. Let's have real conversations.
Get ready to stir it up.
Life events and everything in between. Let's go.
Get ready to stir it up.
No capping. If guests got you covered right up.
Get ready to stir it up. Stir it up.
Come on.
Get ready to stir it up.
Welcome to another episode of Stir It Up. I have my friend Sonia Bozo here again. The last time we spent time talking about things women get away with. We still have a conversation to have on that, because we have a conversation to have about what men can do differently and what women can do differently, how we can hold ourselves more accountable. But today we're thinking about something else. We're thinking about deepening relationships and understanding relationships between a mother and a son. Thank you for coming again. It's really nice to see you.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. I'll always have you because you always have we have a debate. You know, it's not always an agreeable conversation.
It's not fun to be agreeable.
It's not fun to be agreeable. I thought we didn't like conflict, and we kind of like...
It's not conflict, it's debate. There's
It's
a difference
debate.
between conflict and debate.
I agree. So, just to kind of set a bit of context, right? So, mothers and daughters have tricky relationships. Starts off really cool, evolves, and there's a lot of head knocking at some point in time. And as life experience teaches daughters that their mothers are not so bad, they begin to...
As they realize that they also like their mothers.
They also like their mothers as well. They begin to reconvene. If you look at relationships between fathers and daughters, it's around your father is your first love. He's a reflection of what you look for in a man. He's a reflection of your expectation, and he's your one true love. And then there is the mother bit, mothers and sons, which are relationships that are built on lots of love, lots of forgiveness, lots of empathy, lots of tolerance. Sometimes there's an eruption of some conflicts, depending. And then even as men begin to progress and go into other relationships, that also births additional, sometimes conflict, sometimes harmony, it depends. And we want to talk a bit about understanding what is the relationship between what's the relationship between a mother and her son. So if you could attempt to speak on behalf of some men, because I have learned that you're not speaking on the behalf of everybody.
No, I cannot.
You cannot. If you can attempt to make, what's the relationship like?
Oedipus, right? Oedipal complex. It's a complicated relationship, what a man has with a mom.
Okay.
There's, I think, on both sides, unconditional love. I mean, I think that if you speak to every man and the mother, I have no doubt 110% will tell you it's unconditional. And I think that's where it starts. Even where there's conflict, and there's a lot of conflict. I'm an only child, and yet I have lots of conflict with my mom. But I never question her love. I can think her love is misguided, but I can...
Misguided?
Yes, I can never question her love, which is why that births the forgiveness. Because if you feel that somebody's love for you is unconditional, you are more inclined to forgive, because it's coming from a place of unquestioning love. So I think that's the thread, regardless of the iteration it takes, depending on the man and their levels of education and their culture or whatever. That basis and I don't think you would find this. You probably find this a little bit in some romantic love, but that unquestioning love, which is the unconditional love, the Christ love between mother and son, is basic to understanding the relationship.
I'll come back to the unconditional love. can we talk a little bit about that misguided elements that you popped in ever so slightly?
Yeah. So, and you're too sharp for me. You cut onto the little chink. It's misguided because we grow, we evolve, we learn, we're exposed. So as a man, you're coming from, let's say, a very traditional family. You learn, you are educated, and your mom may be equally educated, but you are exposed. You begin to love somebody else. You understand the things that you begin to be exposed to. And the mother is almost set, her love for you as a kid is the same. Sees you as a kid still, doesn't, even if she understands that you've branched out and there are other love interests, sees herself as your first love. You never grow. What belongs to you belongs to her. You go figure that out. And the Bible says the man shall leave the parents and cleave to. Yeah. Go and tell any mother that.
It doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work. So therein lies the genesis of the conflict. And it could be a conflict that hurts the partners, because typically your mother is not able to take it on you. It's deflected to your partner. And
is that because she loves you so much that even so she's not able to? No,
she thinks it's the fault. She doesn't think that you've outgrown that. She thinks it's the fault of the partner.
Taking you away from them.
Consciously disregards the fact that you yourself chose. But it's convenient for her to think that it's the fault of the partner, that you don't have the same relationship.
You know, I have a running joke and I have lots of friends who have sons. And I say two things. I say you need to actively start practicing flying lessons, because very soon you're going to be a witch. And that's when your son gets married. Or raise your son right. Or make sure that you're willing to stay out of that relationship in a fashion that lets your son escape the nest. And all my friends, like clockwork, they say, oh yeah, we're good. I'm like, we're waiting to see.
It will get there. And it's interesting that the first point of call is that she's a witch, right? That's a very traditional.
It is traditional.
You change the W and I, and if you go to another set, it becomes a bitch, right?
Well, yes, that's a good one. Well done.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're not set in a certain traditional setting where your first evil is a witch, then your
first evil is a bitch.
It's a bitch.
That's a really good one.
Now, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the transition, but I think that the man has a role, the son has a role to educate, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Because your wife, let's take your partner and your mother, however, the beginning is rosy.
Of course.
And if you like you know you have the whatever of the data, you know it's not going to last.
The metadata tells you that.
The data says that it's not going to last. So I think the onus is then on the man to be aware and start educating, conscientizing, being the arbiter, and whether that relationship is going to be successful or not depends more on the man than the woman, if you like. I generalize here. I concede, but I think the man, the son, has a role, and the husband has a role to play in the peace.
So, this is a thought for you. I'm a mother. I have daughters, but let's imagine I have a son called, what should my son's name be?
Kwame.
Kwame.
I like Kwame.
So I have a son called
because
Kwame.
I'm Kwame.
I didn't say, why do I keep falling in these traps? So imagine I have a son called Kwame. And I love Kwame. Kwame is smart, he does well in school. I think that Kwame just needs to, do what he needs to do. To do well, excel, get into a job. I have a few options. I can go the route of making Kwame into a bit more of a grounded person, helping him be more self-independent, self-sufficient in the home, not just career-wise, but just even as a man, right? And then I'm in Kwame's life. I'm the center of Kwame's life for a solid 28 years. And then Priscilla shows up.
Or you think you're the center. Just throwing it out there.
You're right. No, you are absolutely right. Because even with my girls, I'm not the center of their life. But I think I'm the center of his life.
There's a comfort
There's a comfort
in
in that.
thinking that you're the center. Granted.
So the comfort is I cook his meals. I know how to make his meals exactly the way he likes it. I know when he's tired. I know what to say to him to calm him down. He tells me stuff. I think he tells me everything even though he doesn't tell me anything. And all of those things. And as life will have it, he'll grow up and have a life of his own. But I like to think that suddenly that he's not calling me as often as he used to call me or coming home as often as he used to come and eat my fufu, Priscilla is the problem. I can see why it can be hard for a mom when they feel like they're losing their son.
The affections of
The
their son.
affections of their son. You say the man has a role to play. What does that role look like?
So before I even answer the question, the idea of you knowing what your son likes best is a myth.
I like that.
So I grew up thinking.
Can you say that again so we can cut it out? Please say it again. Say it and say it with, carry on, ignore
the
me.
thought that you think you know what food your son likes best is a myth. And I'll give you before I answer your question. So my mother doesn't eat fufu. She said when she was growing up, just the sight of somebody pounding and the sweat going into the fufu turns her off. So I grew up not eating a lot of fufu because she likes kokonte. Okay. To make her happy, I don't think I was doing that consciously. But I would eat kokonte anytime she cook it with groundnut soup and but it was not my favorite. But she thought it was my favorite food because I was doing it because it made her happy. I was excited to so I would come home and there was kokonte that was ready. I went to school and she'd bring kokonte. And remember when we were growing up, kokonte wasn't the fare that everybody liked.
It was why are you eating face the wall?
So she brings face the wall to me in school and I'm going, oh my. And then nobody would eat with me and I felt, but it was to make her happy. Now she can go off thinking, something like, and actually she used to say when I grew up to my wife that
kokonte is your favorite meal.
It wasn't.
Got it.
That's how far, that's to illustrate how far we can go to make our mothers happy. And I think that when we do that, and our mothers have a sense of who they think we are, what our likes are, what our predilections are. When another woman comes in and she sees the other part of you, she's hurt. She thinks that two things: either the woman is pulling you away from your core loves,
or changing who you are,
which is not true. Which is why the man has a role in educating. And probably sitting up with mom and say, you know what, this is your Gigi thing. I liked it. That's why.
Gigi favorite food ni. Gigi is not.
It's not of it.
Gigi yo
because it's small butcher.
It's not butcher. Carry on.
Because it's small butcher, right? So I think the man has that responsibility because you stand in a knowledge space that nobody does. You know the partner, you know your mom, you know how you have led her on a certain path because you want to please her. At a certain point, when she's grown and you are grown, you got to disabuse, or just like we're growing up and Father Christmas, you go and see, and you go to, they fill your socks with presents and they say Father Christmas. Nobody came. It's your parents. At some point, you disabused.
But making that step to disabuse your mom of thoughts that she's believed for several years must be hard.
It depends. I feel like I personally, I convey a lot of hard truths in humor. I joke as as a means to an end. Do you know what I mean? I think that you must find a way that is if you like, palatable for whoever you're dealing with, and you've got to, you know, as a son, you owe that responsibility to do that. So I would tell my mom truths in a joke, and she knows me enough. She gets it. She knows me enough to know that that's my way of conveying truths.
So I begin to have the conversation and set the boundaries of what this relationship means to me. I begin to tell my mom, show my mom different sides to myself as a man, right? And say, you know what, this is also important to me just as much as you're important to me. How do you get your mom to understand it's not a competition?
It's a tough one. I don't pretend to have all the answers. Okay. It's a work in progress, even as I sit with you. A lot depends on I can't lump all mothers in the same boat, because I have my mother, other aunties, so I have a lot of mothers in my life, and they're different. Yeah. Even though they're...
Please, are they gone?
Most are gone.
Okay.
most.
Nothing else to say.
but even then, there's not the same leitmotiv running theme for all of them.
No, I
they're
get
different.
that. They're very different, yes.
There are some that are more understanding and more open to having a conversation about tough subjects. There are some that are not open to having a conversation because they are set in their ways and this is how they see things. So you have to figure out, as the son and the husband, figure out what works for this person, how to convey these truths, you know, how to you know, not break the china in your quest to tell the truth.
It's interesting. So my grandma had quite a few sisters. They're all very different. You know, you'd have the one who's the cool aunt who wears red lipstick and wears jeans, and she's in her 60s or 50s, and you know, she rocks up and everybody's thinking, oh, she's cool. And then we have the aunts who are, you know, like they're always giving you advice and telling you how bad your life is and how, you know, you need to be better. And you have the aunt who is very domestic and is more about, you know, so they're all very different. And I can see how, based on their personal values as a woman and what's important to you, it could be a thing where you could project some of that onto other people, expecting that of a daughter-in-law or your son's partner or your son's, you know,
absolutely,
you know, significant other. So I can see that. Are there any stereotypes in this mother-son relationship?
Unfortunately, there are. There's the mother cast as the mother-in-law, you know, and it's loaded. Yeah. Oh, you know, my mother-in-law came to the house. You know how this works. And it's very loaded. And I think it's unfortunate that we do that because, and there's a word that my friends, you would hear me, empathy, right? All you need to do, if you can, is to project yourself into this woman, especially if you have children and they're growing up and you have a son and you have this, you just have to project yourself into this woman and and then you empathize. Now, when you empathize, that means you understand, yes, and you can deal with a person. So it doesn't mean that it excuses or justifies her acts, but when you empathize, it's easy to then begin to find a common ground and solutions for that.
Yeah. So I think it's the thing where mothers invest so much in their children, and sometimes the kids become a finance plan. And it's almost, or they become a retirement plan, or they become an emotional crutch. It could be different things that they become over time.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, you said something. You said, "What's mine is hers." So there's that entitlement that this is my person. Yeah. This is the person I've raised.
Yeah. If you buy a car for your wife, you must buy it for me.
Yeah. Because I changed those diapers. I took care of you.
Yeah.
The nights you had a fever and you were not well. But why don't we have the same expectations of our daughters? I just threw that in there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think a lot of our mothers, I'm winging this.
You're winging it, that's fine.
I'm winging this. I think we grow up thinking the man takes care of the house. And if if a group of people, a cohort of people have this, it's the generation before ours. So, and remember that if you go further down a generation before theirs, the women were not even educated, right? And the men were educated, and they were supposed to take care of the home. So your mother coming from that mind, I'm a big fan of the whys and going back, because that begins to explain how the person is thinking. Without, some people think a certain way without knowing the influences why they're thinking that way. And sometimes in order to empathize, you have to think.
You have to understand
the unarticulated impulses that leads them in a certain way. And I think that growing up, a lot of our mothers come from a situation where it's the man takes care of the house. So then, when I have a son,
that's his responsibility
to take care of me,
okay.
Right? And so even when the woman or their daughters are more capable in terms of being financially more secure, they're still thinking that the men and the boys should be the ones who do it.
It's nice and eye-opening. Maybe I should say it's eye-opening to hear you say that. Because a lot of the time, it's from the perspective of the investments mothers have made. But what I hear you say is, it's not just that I've invested in you as my son, it's also because you are a man, and that's the expectation.
Culturally, mindset-wise,
yes.
Historically, there are a lot of factors that make. So yes, you are my, what do you call it? Cash box. Yeah. But why are you my cash box?
Because that's a function of a man. It's not a function
exactly.
of a woman. And the same expectations are extended to your daughter's husband and not necessarily your daughter.
So even though she may be she may bring the bacon home, somehow it's if the husband is not as equally whatever like the daughter, there's some kind of backlash against the husband. Right? Because it's a mindset, it's where they're coming from. And I think you need to understand that to engage them. Otherwise, there's always conflict. Right? Either you explain this to them, which is probably, if you ask me, 80% of it, or you then tweak your conversations to kind of factor this in as you engage with them.
So you've said one of the solutions or one of the things that help, make this easier is the man taking the responsibility of leading the relationships on both sides and having open and honest conversations. If you were to hazard a guess, what would be one thing that as mothers we also need to be mindful of in our relationship with our sons, knowing that they're independent and they are their own people?
I think they have to be mindful of the fact that, do you want your son to be respected by the wife? And if you do, then you change, because there are things that you do that would make the woman, do you want him to be a respected person? Now, because I think that in that whole conception of the son and the responsibilities and what I want from him, you're not thinking about how people perceive or the partner perceives him, whether in doing that you're weakening him or you are taking away from him. I think that's not at the forefront. But I think the few people or the few mothers that I have spoken to who kind of obliquely understand this, they have a different way of engaging.
My husband is tied to his mother's apron strings.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things you want to take away.
Yeah.
You don't want it to seem like the mom is manipulating you don't want to create the impression to your daughter-in-law that you manipulate the son, right? It should be that he makes his own decisions. Would that be how you're looking at it?
And that's actually that, regardless of what you do, again, that's the other conversation. The wives are likely to make that accusation. Anyways, regardless. Now, so then that's why there's also the other responsibility of the things that your mother pulls at your heartstrings, and there's nothing you can do about it. You don't act out of logic. You act because she's your mother and you love her. And between the two of you, the one who's you think is more progressive because she's lived with you and she's whatever, and your mother, you tend to, if you like, genuflect to your mom because you think she's more emotionally vulnerable. But you need to communicate that. Now, when you try to pander to her, then you're tied to the apron strings.
Yes. So when you talk about you're weakening him in that relationship, can you give me an example?
I haven't paused because, for lack of examples, I'm trying to find one which conveys that profoundly, and I'm struggling to do that. But assuming, for example, that your mom wants to come to your house and wants to spend the whole week there, and you have other commitments, so you cannot make the room or house available to her, and she insists. Now you have other commitments, and typically moms think that your only commitment in the whole world is to them.
Like jump, and it's how high.
You have work commitments, you have your own other family commitments, you have other social commitments. Now, the moment you insist on that and you pull emotional strings, and the man cannot do anything about it, that has consequences for other relationships, and people begin to perceive him
as weak. And it goes back to you're tied to your mother's apron string.
Yes.
Or she manipulates you, or she controls you, or
but because she's probably going to be an emotional wreck, whether pretense-wise or genuinely, and you don't want that. And another time, one of the things that men say to them is, "Oh, but she doesn't have long to live, so we can accommodate her."
But then that also has an impact on your main relationship,
doesn't it?
It? Yeah.
It does. I feel like we are cast in a place where we cannot win.
It's almost like a double-edged sword or a catch-22 situation, isn't it? I'll go back to when you talked about unconditional love.
I hope all the ladies in the production team are listening.
They are listening very, very, very actively, I'm very sure. Going back to the point of unconditional love, we love our our children unconditionally. And my assumption is that, and I make an assumption here, do you think a woman loving her husband unconditionally is something that's important to a man? Because his relationship with his mom is based on her not seeing any wrong in him, or her constantly being a cheerleader, a support system, and a provider and a caregiver. All of these things mothers are to their kids. And then you go into this other relationship suddenly, and you are meant to be the provider, but you are the provider who's always being criticized, or you didn't do this, or you left the toilet seat up, you didn't do that, you didn't do this, or you should have paid this, you should have done that. And so you are no longer in that place where you feel unconditionally loved. I'm not asking this question because I think wives can suddenly unconditionally love their husbands like they love their children. But I want to understand, will it matter to a man if he felt that there was that level of intimacy from their...
Yeah, I mean, I think men are... We have thin egos.
Thin?
Very thin egos. And I think that thin ego is nurtured by all the attributes of the mom that we've described, from, the whole mom-son thing. So we grow up with a sense of entitlement to that unconditional love, where you can do no wrong with your mom. Now, then you go and marry, and you have a wife who loves you romantically, but almost like has a glare like we have on this light on all your foibles and faults.
And she's so close to it that she sees it more than anyone else
She sees
does.
more than anybody else. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeing the faults. it is how, because we are not faultless, both of us, but it is how you approach it and how you convey to the man without diminishing him, right? So see the faults, and in fact, good feedback helps the man be a better person, but don't do it in a way that destroys his ego. In the same way, and it cuts both ways. But I think that more than anything else, because we have that fragile, and I'm sure the men are going to beat me up, but we do have a fragile ego. Our mothers make us special, and then we come to a woman who puts the glare on you and is unforgiving
And will
about
not
your
put
fault.
the glare on their own kids.
Will not. So again, that comes back to empathy. When you see yourself doing that and you're aware that with my son, I am unconditional. This man who is somebody's son who's raised him the same way, that awareness should help you then begin to know how to treat him.
Do you think mothers do their sons a service? And I'm not trying to generalize here, but do mothers tell their sons things they don't want to hear?
A few do.
A few do.
A few do. So in my marriage, from my mother's point of view, I'm never right. My wife is always right. I think it's a dispute resolution mechanism where it feels like over years she's established this with me, that she can afford to get on the wrong side of me.
Yes.
Right?
But she can't afford to get on the
On
wrong
the wrong
side.
side. I don't know whether it's a good thing, but I feel like if I have to choose between, that's probably a good thing, because it's
It
telling-
is a good thing because it creates a safety net for you in your marriage.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm never right. I mean, in both actually that comes from both all my parents. I'm never right. I'm always in the wrong.
Yes.
So I have to develop a thick skin to deal with that.
That's an interesting strategy, because what that does is it takes out the external conflict and it narrows it down to your relationship with your partner. Because what would happen is, if your mom seemed to be supportive of you, it would be seen as a bias,
Yeah.
right? But if she says, you know what, I don't think you got it right, go fix it, immediately she's not an issue in that discussion anymore. It allows you to focus on the relationship and what's not going right, or what you need to resolve.
Absolutely. And in every conflict, there are two sides to the coin.
Yes.
So focusing on yours, it's like, okay, yeah, I know, but you, what can you do?
Okay.
Go on,
No,
sorry.
go on.
And I think that even when you do that, it's funny how the women still have issues with the mom. That you have to talk me through that.
No, I think that, and I gave you this running joke about mother-in-laws eventually either become a witch or a bitch. Now that you've said it, and it's because you think that that's the natural progression of things, and you think that she's a source of a lot of your unhappiness. I don't agree with that entirely. I think that, like you rightly said, there are certain boundaries that need to be set in the relationship, and those boundaries are set by the man. Because the truth is that he's not going to stop loving his mom just because he's met you, because his mom has been in his life and she's been there.
And if he does, I have a couple of situations in the minority where he does, because of all the pressures of it's terrible.
Yes.
On him, on his psyche, on the family, on the. So it's a no-win situation when you manage to get him not to be a son.
Because that's his first love.
That's the umbilical cord. It's tethered
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, physically to that. You cannot untether him and have the whole man.
Yeah. I find that expression interesting. You cannot untether a man from his mother and have a whole man.
You can't.
Yeah, I can see that, because there is a deepness to that relationship that has depth and has longevity.
He birthed him. She birthed him when he was not cognitive. She birthed him when there was the soul support for 9 months. There's a spiritual connection.
Okay. So I have a sentence I want you to complete and tell me what your thoughts are. If only wives could love their husbands as unconditionally as they love their sons,
Would have nirvana on earth.
We'll have what? Nirvana.
Nirvana.
We'll have Nirvana on Earth.
It will be the happily ever after fairy tale ending that we read from Grimm's, and they have to. I mean, that's.
But that's quite simple, but hard.
Yeah, I agree. It's simplistic,
Very simplistic as a view, right?
Yeah, but it's true.
Okay.
Is it attainable? It takes hard work. It doesn't come instinctively or intuitively. It's, but if you can if you can work towards that, you have you have the beginnings of peace.
So let's wrap this up with one thing. If you look at mothers today and how we raise our sons and that connection we build, and there were 3 things you could tell any mother about that relationship and what it means to them or what it means to their son, or what would those 3 things be?
If my mother was here, she'd go like, he doesn't know anything. Let me tell you what 3 things. That your little boy grows up. And you should be proud that he grows up and is a man and he has a mind of his own. You should celebrate that. You should be proud of what you've cultivated, never mind birth, nurtured into. And if you differ, you should still celebrate it. And then the third thing is, we love you as unconditionally as you love us.
Okay.
Unconditional. There may be there may be strife, there may be not talking to your mother for 10 years but the love is unconditional. There's nothing you can do to that. Don't think even the man has control or is aware of that, the depth of that.
Okay. And what would you say to the man?
I think a lot of men have to learn to be arbiters. You're never, to every rule there's an exception, and the exception proves that you're probably going to have a few, but most of us would have to be arbiters in this tension between wife and mother. We have to learn, we have to acquire the skills to be the peacemaker. And it's an ongoing situation. You learn, you evolve, but you will never escape that. And the earlier you build, you come to terms with that and build those skills and utilize them, the better for you.
Okay. What would you say to wives?
Just love unconditionally too.
That was a good one.
Just love us unconditionally.
Moving on to the fun part of this, I will make you a cocktail. Seeing as the last time you were completely unable to guess what was in my cocktail, and you only managed to remember the name of the thing you claimed was in it, let's see if you improve in this. You did get it right though. You just couldn't
put a name to it, and you didn't help me.
Together. So to the interesting part of this, and once again, middle of the day. So I'm gonna be. Let's see how it goes.
Okay.
You know, right now you have to redeem yourself.
I am redeeming myself.
Okay. Because the other redemption was off camera, so nobody knows you actually redeemed yourself.
A redemption is a redemption.
Okay, go on. Let's see.
I'm a man of integrity. I told Ikuya before shooting that there was chocolate in it, and she agreed. But I got it right. So there's chocolate here. Let me try something else. Let me try to be.
Let's see.
There's.
I don't know.
Okay, so I'll do chocolate brandy.
You got the brandy wrong. There is something with chocolate in it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to tell me what that something is.
Why?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Stir it up.